I found my brother's secret bank statement in the recycling bin at 2 a.m. And that's when I realized he wasn't here to save our dying father. He was here to rob him blind. My hands were shaking as I pieced together the shredded strips on the cold granite countertop, coffee grounds staining my fingers. The fluorescent light above the sink hummed like an interrogation lamp, casting harsh shadows across evidence of a crime I wasn't supposed to discover. The bank logo was from a private wealth firm I'd never seen before, my father's name at the top. But the address was a P.O. box I'd never heard of. And then, the line that made my blood run cold. A wire transfer dated last week for $150,000. The recipient, Apex Heritage Holdings LLC. Apex, the name of the peak my brother Adam claimed to have climbed in Colorado last year, but one he'd bragged about at Christmas. Heritage. Our heritage. He was stealing our father's legacy right under my nose, right under the roof of the house our father had built with his own two hands. The prodigal son who'd returned to help wasn't a savior. He was a predator, and he was devouring our family from the inside out. Before the stroke, my life had settled into something comfortable and predictable. At 48, I owned a small but successful landscape design business. I lived in a cottage 20 minutes from my childhood home, where my father Richard still lived alone after my mother's death a decade ago. Dad and I had fallen into a new kind of partnership after Mom passed. We weren't just father and daughter. We were confidants, gardening partners, co-conspirators in our shared love for old films and British history. My father was a retired history professor, a man of quiet integrity and unwavering principles. He saw the world in long scales and tragedies, sweeping arcs of time, finding lessons in the fall of empires and the resilience of forgotten cultures. The scent of old books, pipe tobacco, and freshly turned earth. That was the smell of my childhood, the smell of him. Our days were filled with simple rituals: morning coffee on his sun-drenched porch, afternoons wrestling with stubborn clay soil in his rose garden, evenings debating Churchill versus Roosevelt. It was peaceful, and I cherished it more than I ever admitted. My brother Adam was the opposite of this quiet life. 5 years older, he was the brilliant burning star to my steady, distant moon. From childhood, he'd been the performer, the charmer, the one who could talk his way into anything. He'd gone into commercial real estate and become, by all appearances, wildly successful. He lived in a sleek, glass-walled condo in the city, drove a car that cost more than my first house, spoke in a language of acquisitions and portfolios and leveraging assets that felt alien to me. Our sibling rivalry had been a low-grade hum throughout our lives. He saw my life as small and unambitious. I saw his as hollow and performative. He'd always been our mother's favorite, the one she bragged about, while I was the reliable one who stayed close to home. We weren't estranged, not exactly, but our relationship was polite formalities and conversations that never strayed too far from the surface. He'd call on holidays, send expensive but impersonal gifts, maintain the perfect veneer of a dutiful son, as long as it didn't require any real effort. Then Dad had the stroke. It happened on a Tuesday in early spring, a day that started with cheerful robins and the scent of damp earth. I found him on the floor of his study, his beloved leather-bound copy of Gibbon's Decline and Fall splayed beside him. His face was slackened on one side, his eyes wide with a terror he couldn't voice. The world tilted on its axis. The weeks that followed were a blur of sterile hospital corridors, incessant beeping of machines, hushed conversations with doctors using words like ischemic and aphasia. Dad survived, but the man who came home was a ghost of his former self. His mind, once a library of historical facts and eloquent arguments, was now a confusing labyrinth. He struggled for words. His memory flickered in and out, and a profound, heartbreaking vulnerability had replaced his steadfast confidence. He would sit in his armchair for hours, staring out at the garden he could no longer tend, lost in a fog I couldn't penetrate. It was during that first terrifying week that Adam called. I was at the hospital, exhausted, running on stale coffee and fear. "I'm coming home, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying a gravity I'd never heard before. "I'll work remotely. We'll get through this together. I'll handle everything." For the first time in my life, I believed him. Relief so powerful it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. I wasn't alone in this. My big brother, the golden boy, was coming to the rescue. When he arrived, he was a whirlwind of competence. He swept in, not with a suitcase, but an entire mobile office. He hired the best in-home caregivers, scheduled physical therapy appointments, took over the endless stream of medical bills and insurance paperwork that had been drowning me. He spoke to doctors with an authority I couldn't muster, and seemed to understand the complex financial implications of Dad's long-term care. "You focus on Dad's spirit, Sarah," he'd say, patting my shoulder with reassuring firmness that felt both comforting and dismissive. "Let me worry about the nuts and bolts. That's what I'm good at." We fell into a new routine. I'd spend my days with Dad, reading to him from his history books, helping him with his garden, trying to coax sparks of the old him back to the surface. Adam would be on his laptop in the study, door always closed, his voice a low constant murmur on conference calls about mitigating risk and maximizing returns. It felt like we'd finally put our rivalry behind us, united by shared crisis. I was so grateful, so utterly relieved, that I didn't see the subtle, creeping changes happening right in front of me. I chose not to see them. The first crack in Adam's perfect facade appeared about a month after he moved in. My Uncle Gene called. Dad's younger brother, a gruff, no-nonsense farmer from 2 counties over. He and Dad had spoken every Sunday night for 30 years, a ritual as sacred as church. "I can't seem to get a hold of your father," Gene grumbled. "This new caregiver Adam hired keeps saying he's resting." "It's been 2 weeks, Sarah. Is he all right?" I frowned. "He's been tired, but not that tired. He'd love to hear your voice. Let me put him on." I walked toward the living room where Dad was sitting, watching birds at the feeder. Adam intercepted me in the hallway, holding up a hand. He had his phone pressed to his other ear, but his eyes, sharp and commanding, were on me. "He's just about to take a nap," Adam whispered, voice smooth as silk. "Doctor's orders. He gets agitated if his routine is broken. It can set back his cognitive therapy." "I'll have him call Gene back later." It seemed reasonable, a logical precaution. I didn't want to upset Dad. "Of course," I said, turning back to the kitchen. "Tell Gene he'll call tomorrow." Except Dad never called tomorrow, or the day after. When I asked Adam about it, he'd sigh with exaggerated patience. "I keep forgetting, Sarah. I'm juggling a lot here. Can you remind me tomorrow?" But tomorrow never came. The pattern repeated with Mr. Henderson, Dad's best friend from his department. They'd taught together for 30 years, had written 3 papers together, had shared countless debates about Roman history over whiskey in this very study, with the neighbors who'd known Dad for 30 years, who'd helped him build the back deck, who'd been at my mother's funeral, with his financial advisor who wanted to discuss his portfolio, a man Dad had trusted for 2 decades. Each time, Adam had a perfectly reasonable explanation that felt airtight in the moment, but hollow in retrospect. "Dad needs to rest. The doctor said to limit stimulation. He's not having a good day. I'll schedule it for next week." The next week never came. I told myself I was being paranoid, seeing shadows where there was only concern. Adam was protecting Dad, managing his energy, keeping the vultures at bay. That's what good sons did, right? That's what family was supposed to do during a crisis. But something gnawed at me, a splinter under the skin that I couldn't quite reach, couldn't quite identify. A wrongness in the air, like the electrical charge before a storm. It was little things at first. The way Adam would stand too close when I tried to have private conversations with Dad. Always hovering, always listening. How he'd taken over Dad's phone, claiming he was screening calls to prevent stress. But somehow every call that made it through was from Adam's own business associates or lawyers I'd never heard of. The mail started going to a P.O. box. More secure, Adam said. With Dad's condition, we can't risk identity theft. Dad's longtime doctor suddenly retired, replaced by a younger physician who seemed to defer to Adam on every decision. The physical therapist, who'd been making real progress with Dad, was let go, replaced by someone cheaper, less experienced. And then came the day I arrived unannounced, using my key to let myself in, and found Dad sitting alone in the living room, tears streaming down his weathered face, his hands trembling in his lap. "Dad?" I rushed to him, kneeling beside his chair. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" He looked at me with those confused, frightened eyes and struggled to form words. You came," he finally managed, his voice breaking. Adam said, "You were too busy," said you didn't want. Ice flooded my veins. "Dad, I come every day. I've been trying to visit every single day." But even as I said it, I realized it wasn't true anymore. Because every time I'd tried to visit in the past 2 weeks, Adam had intercepted me at the door. Bad day, sleeping, not feeling up to visitors. Always with that concerned, apologetic expression that made me feel guilty for even asking. I'd believed him. I'd actually stood on my father's porch and turned away, because my brother told me it wasn't a good time. Before I could process this revelation, Adam appeared in the doorway, his laptop under one arm, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression shifted instantly when he saw me. A flicker of something dark, quickly masked by concern. "Sarah, I didn't hear you come in." "Dad's supposed to be napping right now. The doctor said routine is crucial for his cognitive recovery." He turned his attention to Dad, his voice taking on that saccharine, condescending tone people use with children. "Come on, Dad, let's get you to bed. You're clearly exhausted and getting confused." "I'm not confused," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. "I'm visiting my father. Something I should be able to do without scheduling an appointment through you." Adam's smile tightened. "Of course you can visit, but maybe we should coordinate better? For Dad's sake?" Too much chaos in his routine can trigger setbacks. The neurologist was very clear about that. He was so smooth, so reasonable. And yet I could see my father shrinking in his chair, could see the tears he was trying to hide, could feel the wrongness of this entire situation like a weight on my chest. But I didn't have proof. I had instinct and suspicion and a growing knot of dread. So I left. I hugged my father, whispered that I loved him, and I left. And that night, I couldn't sleep because every interaction I'd dismissed as Adam being protective now looked different in this new light. Every reasonable explanation felt like a carefully constructed lie. The fortress he'd built around our father wasn't for Dad's protection. It was to keep the rest of us out while Adam did something terrible inside those walls. Then came the night I found the bank statement. After discovering that shredded statement at 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed in the cottage, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything I'd dismissed, every small warning sign I'd ignored. The closed study door, the whispered phone calls, the way Adam always intercepted the mail before I could see it, how he'd gradually taken over every single aspect of Dad's life, his finances, his medical care, his social connections. He'd built a fortress around our father, and I'd been so grateful for the help that I'd never questioned why he needed a fortress at all. The next morning, I went through Dad's filing cabinet. Adam was at a breakfast meeting, or so he said. Dad was in his physical therapy session with the caregiver. I found nothing. Every file was meticulously organized, every document in its proper place. It was almost too perfect. Dad had never been this organized in his life. He'd been brilliant, but scattered. The kind of man who kept important documents in books and stuffed receipts in coat pockets. This wasn't Dad's filing system. This was Adam's, which meant the real documents, the ones Adam didn't want me to see, were somewhere else. I spent the next 3 days watching, learning his patterns, noting when he left the house, when he worked from the study, when he was distracted on conference calls. And then I found my opening. Adam had to drive into the city for an in-person meeting. He'd be gone for at least 4 hours. The moment his car disappeared down the driveway, I went to work. The study door was locked, but I knew where Dad kept the spare key. Inside the hollow garden gnome by the porch. Adam didn't know about that. It had been our secret. A relic from when I was a teenager, sneaking into Dad's study to read his history books. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. The room smelled like leather and Adam's expensive cologne. A stark contrast to the pipe tobacco and old books I remembered. His laptop was password protected, but the filing cabinet wasn't. Inside, I found a folder labeled Estate Planning Confidential. My heart hammered as I opened it. Power of attorney documents, new will, bank statements from accounts I'd never heard of. Legal documents transferring property to LLCs with names I didn't recognize. Apex Heritage Holdings, Summit Capital Management, Pinnacle Asset Trust. Every name a mountain peak, a testament to climbing higher, reaching the top, conquering. The new will was dated 3 weeks after Dad's stroke, when he could barely speak, when his mind was still fogged with medication and confusion. It left everything to Adam. Not split between us. Everything. A scrawled signature at the bottom that looked like Dad's handwriting, but wrong. The tremor was too pronounced. The letters too uncertain. I photographed everything with my phone. My hands steadier now, fueled by cold fury rather than fear. Then I found the notebook. A leather-bound ledger tucked in the back of the bottom drawer, hidden beneath folders. It was Adam's personal accounting of every transaction. Every transfer out of Dad's accounts. Every property deed changed. Every asset moved. Meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and, most damning of all, handwritten notes in Adam's precise script. R.A. confused today, signed without reading. Told R.A. this was just tax paperwork. R.A. asked for Sarah, told him she called, can't visit. The last entry made me physically sick. I had to sit down on the floor, the notebook in my trembling hands, fighting the urge to vomit. He'd been telling our father I didn't want to see him. Telling him I was too busy. That I'd called and said I couldn't come. While I was outside the door, desperate to spend time with Dad, Adam had been feeding him lies. He'd isolated Dad completely, cut him off from everyone who might question what was happening. Made himself the sole gatekeeper, the only voice our father heard. And he documented his own crime in perfect detail, so arrogant in his belief that no one would ever find it. I photographed every page. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Locked the study door and returned the key to the garden gnome. That night, I didn't confront Adam. I didn't scream or cry or demand explanations. I learned something crucial from my years of tending gardens. Sometimes you have to be patient. You have to wait for the right moment to pull the weed, or you risk damaging the entire plant. So I smiled. I made dinner. I asked Adam how his meeting went, and I started building my case. And each rejection felt like another door slamming in my face. The first attorney I consulted was a pleasant woman in her 50s who specialized in family law. She listened politely to my story, looked through the photographs I'd taken, and shook her head with what looked like genuine sympathy. Ms. Anderson, I believe you. I really do. But elder financial abuse is notoriously difficult to prove in court. Your father signed these documents. Yes, he was incapacitated. But Adam can produce doctors who will testify to competency at the time of signing. It becomes a very expensive he said, she said. The second lawyer was more blunt. You're looking at 2 to 5 years of litigation and legal fees that could exceed $1 million. Even if you win, it might be a Pyrrhic victory. You'll have spent everything fighting for an inheritance that's been depleted by legal costs. The third lawyer wouldn't even take a meeting after hearing the basics over the phone. Family dispute over inheritance with a power of attorney in place. That's a minefield I don't want to walk into. I sat in my car after that third rejection, my hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to scream or cry or just give up entirely. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was too hard, too expensive, too complicated. Maybe Adam had won simply by being smart enough and ruthless enough to work within the legal system. But then I thought about my father's face when he'd asked why I never visited. I thought about 30 years of Sunday night phone calls with Uncle Gene, severed by lies. I thought about that notebook with Adam's handwritten notes. Told R.A. she can't visit. No, I wasn't giving up. I just needed someone who'd fought these battles before and won. That's how I found Margaret Davies. Her office wasn't in a gleaming downtown high-rise like the other lawyers I'd consulted. It was in a converted brownstone in an older part of a city, with creaky hardwood floors and walls lined with legal books that looked actually read rather than decorative. The receptionist was a woman in her 70s who offered me tea and called me dear. Margaret herself was 67 years old, with steel gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through any pretense or bullshit. She wore a simple gray suit and sensible shoes, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm enough to crack walnuts. I have 30 minutes, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Convince me to take your case. I told her everything. The stroke, Adam's arrival, the systematic isolation, the hidden bank accounts, the notebook, Maria's observations. I showed her the photographs, the timeline I'd constructed, the pattern of transfers. She listened without interrupting, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she sat back and studied me for a long moment. Why did you wait to come to me? She asked. I wanted to be sure, I said. I wanted to have everything documented. I didn't want to accuse my brother of something this terrible unless I was absolutely certain. She smiled then, a sharp predatory smile that should have terrified me, but instead filled me with hope. Good. That shows you understand how this works. You can't unring the spell. Once you start this fight, it's going to get ugly. Your brother will hire the best lawyers his stolen money can buy. He'll paint you as the jealous, grasping younger sister. He'll make you look like the villain. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my father sitting in his chair, staring out at his garden, believing I was too busy to visit him. I thought about Uncle Gene's unanswered calls, about Mr. Henderson being turned away at the door, about the life's savings my father had built through 40 years of teaching, now being siphoned into shell companies named after mountain peaks. I'm prepared, I said. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp and focused. Then let me tell you how this is going to work. We're not filing a lawsuit. Not yet. That would take years and cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, money I suspect you don't have. Instead, we're going to request a formal mediation through the court system. It's a neutral setting where both parties present their positions. And Adam will agree to that? He'll have to, if we frame it correctly. We'll make it sound like a good faith attempt to resolve family issues before involving the courts. He'll think he can charm his way through it, smooth everything over with his lawyers and his reasonable explanations. He doesn't know what we have. He doesn't know about Maria's willingness to testify. He doesn't know you photographed his ledger." She pulled out a legal pad and began making notes in precise handwriting. "The key is the element of surprise. If he knows we have this evidence, he'll hide it, destroy it, create cover stories. So you have to pretend nothing has changed. Can you do that? Can you go home and smile at your brother and act like everything is fine while we build the case?" The thought of pretending, of being near Adam while knowing what he'd done, made my skin crawl. But I'd spent months not seeing what was right in front of my face. I could spend a few more weeks playing a role. "I can do it," I said. "Then let's go to war." Margaret's strategy was elegant in its simplicity. We wouldn't file a lawsuit. Not yet. That would take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars I didn't have. Instead, we'd request a mediation through the court, a neutral setting where both parties would present their positions. "Adam will think he can charm his way through it," Margaret explained during our second meeting. "He'll think mediation is just a formality, something he can smooth over with his lawyers and his reasonable explanations. He spent his whole life talking his way out of situations. He doesn't know what we have, and that's our advantage." She laid out a careful timeline. First, we needed to lock down Maria's testimony before Adam had any idea she might turn against him. Then, we needed to request the mediation in a way that seemed conciliatory, non-threatening. We'd frame it as a family matter that we wanted to resolve in good faith before involving the courts. "The hardest part," Margaret said, her eyes sharp on mine, "will be the next 3 weeks of pretending nothing has changed. You can't let Adam know you've been in his study. You can't give him time to hide evidence or create new cover stories. You have to go home and smile and play the dutiful sister while we build the case. Can you do that?" The thought made my stomach turn. Going home to that house. Smiling at the man who was systematically robbing our father. Pretending I didn't know what he was doing in that locked study. "I can do it," I said. "Good. Because if he suspects anything, he'll destroy that notebook, erase the digital trails, maybe even fire Maria and hire someone new who hasn't seen anything. We get one shot at this. We have to make it count." So I played my role, the dutiful sister, grateful for her brother's help. Focused on Dad's care while Adam handled the complicated stuff. I made dinners. I asked politely about his meetings. I even thanked him for taking care of everything. Every word felt like ash in my mouth. But I was also working. Carefully, methodically, the way I approached a complex landscape design, understanding the terrain before making changes. I tracked down Maria, Dad's primary caregiver. I'd always liked her. She was kind to Dad, patient with his confusion, genuinely warm. But I'd never really talked to her beyond pleasantries and updates on Dad's condition. I waited until Adam was out of town for a 2-day business trip. Then I called Maria and asked if she'd meet me for coffee at a diner 3 towns away, somewhere Adam would never go. She arrived looking nervous, her hands clasped tightly around her purse strap. She was in her mid-50s, a stocky woman with kind brown eyes and graying black hair pulled back in a practical bun. She'd emigrated from El Salvador 20 years ago and had been working with dementia patients ever since. We ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather. Then I took a breath and asked directly, "Maria, has my brother ever done anything with my father that made you uncomfortable?" She went very still. Her eyes dropped to her coffee cup, studying it like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. "I could lose my job," she finally said. Her voice barely above a whisper. Her accent was slight but present, her words careful and precise. "I have 2 children. My daughter is in college. I cannot afford." "Not if what you're telling me is the truth," I interrupted gently. "My brother has been doing something terrible to my father. I know it. But I need someone who saw it to tell me I'm not crazy. I need someone to tell the truth." She looked up then, meeting my eyes, and I saw the relief there, the relief of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret, and finally had permission to set it down. "Your father," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "He is a good man. Very kind, even when he is confused. He talks about your mother, about teaching, about his roses. And every day, every single day, Miss Sarah, he asks for you." My throat tightened. "What does Adam tell him?" I asked, though I already knew. "He tells him you are too busy. That you called but you cannot come. That you have problems with your work, with your life. Sometimes he says you are unwell. Your father, he gets so sad. He sits by the window and waits for you. And she paused, tears welling in her eyes. I hear you sometimes outside, wanting to visit. And Mr. Adam, he sends you away. He lies to both of you." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected it for weeks. "Is there more?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "The papers. Mr. Adam brings papers for your father to sign. He waits until after the pain medication, when your father is most confused. He tells him they're for taxes, for insurance, just forms that need signing. Where father, he trusts his son, so he signs." "How often?" "Many times. Once, twice a week, for the first month Mr. Adam was here. Your father would ask what he was signing, and Mr. Adam would," she demonstrated, putting her hand over an invisible paper, covering everything except a signature line, like this. So your father could only see where to sign, not what the paper said. "Did you see what the papers were?" "Sometimes. Legal things. Property transfers. Bank forms. I do not understand these things, but I know they are important, and I know your father, he would not understand them either, not in his condition." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of the notebook I'd found. "Have you seen this before?" She studied it, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes. Mr. Adam keeps it in his briefcase. Sometimes he writes in it after your father signs something. I saw it once when I brought him coffee in the study. Would you be willing to make a sworn statement about what you've witnessed? To sign an affidavit?" The fear came back into her eyes, sharp and immediate. "If I do this, Mr. Adam, he will fire me. He will make sure I cannot work again. Men like him, they have power. They have lawyers. I have a lawyer too," I said. "A very good one, and she'll protect you. What Adam is doing is illegal, Maria. It's called elder abuse. It's a crime. You wouldn't be betraying a confidence or getting involved in a family dispute. You'd be protecting my father, and that's what you've been trying to do all along, isn't it?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, like it was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "Your father," she finally said, "he is a good man. He deserves better than this. He deserves his daughter. Yes, I will tell the truth." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means." She squeezed back. "I know exactly how much it means, Miss Sarah. I see it in your father's face every day when he asks for you. That is why I will do this." Exclamation. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the courthouse. Adam arrived in his $1,000 suit, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. He smiled when he saw me, that same reassuring smile he'd been giving me for months. "Sarah, is this really necessary? We can work this out as a family." "We're not a family," I said quietly. "We haven't been for a long time." The smile faltered. The mediator, Mrs. Albright, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been doing this for 20 years. She explained the process, asked both parties to present their concerns. Adam's lawyers went first. They painted a picture of a devoted son who'd sacrificed his career to care for his ailing father, who'd handled complex medical and financial decisions, while his sister focused on the emotional aspects of care. They presented the new will as a reflection of Dad's wishes, properly executed, perfectly legal. They made me sound like a jealous, grasping younger sister upset about being cut out of the inheritance. Then it was our turn. Margaret stood up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply laid out the timeline. The stroke. Adam's sudden arrival. The systematic isolation of our father from everyone who'd known him. The new will, signed when Dad could barely speak. The power of attorney, executed during the period doctors' notes showed he was heavily medicated and confused. Then she produced the bank statements. Apex Heritage Holdings, she said, her voice flat and clinical. Summit Capital Management. Pinnacle Asset Trust. Shell companies registered 3 weeks after Richard Anderson's stroke. All with Adam Anderson listed as the managing member. She placed financial records on the table, one after another. $150,000 transferred here. $200,000 there. The family home valued at $850,000, transferred to a trust controlled exclusively by Adam Anderson. Adam's lawyers were scrambling now, trying to interject, but Margaret plowed on. Every single transaction occurred during the period when Mr. Richard Anderson was legally incapacitated. Every signature was obtained when medical records show he was confused and medicated. And every asset was funneled into companies that exist solely to enrich Adam Anderson, while systematically stripping his father of his life's savings. She paused, letting the weight of the accusations settle over the room like a heavy blanket. Adam's face had gone from confident to pale. This is ridiculous. I was managing Dad's affairs. That's what power of attorney means. Power of attorney means acting in the principal's best interest, Margaret cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. Not enriching yourself at his expense. That's called embezzlement. And when the victim is elderly and incapacitated, it's called elder abuse. She produced the notebook then. Adam's handwritten ledger, photographed page by page, blown up large enough for everyone to read. His own handwriting, his own notes. R.A. confused today, signed without reading. Told R.A. this was just tax paperwork. The color drained completely from Adam's face. My client was protecting his father's assets, one of his lawyers said. But even he sounded uncertain now. Were you? Margaret's voice cut through his objection like a scalpel. Then she delivered the final blow. I have here a sworn, notarized affidavit from Maria Vargas, Mr. Anderson's primary caregiver. Adam froze. He stared at the document like it might burst into flames. Margaret read Maria's statement aloud. Every detail. Adam's misrepresentation of documents. The way he'd guide Dad's trembling hand to force signatures. The lies he told our father about me being too busy to visit, when I was waiting right outside the door. The room was utterly silent, except for the sound of Adam's shallow, panicked breathing. He finally looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. Pure, undiluted hatred. But beneath it, something else. Terror. The absolute, bottomless fear of being truly seen for the first time. The mask was gone. The charming, successful son was gone. All that was left was the predator, exposed and thrashing in the light. Mrs. Albright spoke, her voice leaving no room for argument. Mr. Anderson, you're facing serious allegations of elder financial abuse, fraud, and undue influence. These are criminal offenses. Miss Davies has informed me that her client is prepared to file formal complaints with Adult Protective Services and the District Attorney's Office, and to initiate a civil suit to recover all misappropriated funds. She let the words hang in the air, heavy and final. However, she continued, your sister has expressed a desire to handle this without further damage to your father's name and legacy. She's offering you a choice. Margaret slid a final document across the table, a settlement agreement. The new will would be declared null and void. Power of attorney immediately revoked, and transferred to a neutral third party chosen by the court. All funds transferred to Apex Heritage Holdings and any other entities returned to Dad's estate within 7 days, with punitive interest. And finally, Adam would forfeit his entire share of the inheritance to cover legal fees, forensic accounting, and emotional distress. He would walk away with nothing. He stared at the paper, hands trembling. He looked around the room at the faces of people he'd deceived. His uncle, his father's best friend, his sister. There was no support here, no escape. He built his world on a foundation of lies, and I'd just kicked it out from under him. I felt no triumphant glee watching him, just profound, aching sadness for the brother I'd lost long ago, or perhaps never really had. The justice I needed wasn't about seeing him punished in court. It was this: watching him face the truth of who he was in a quiet room, stripped of power and lies, witnessed by the people who represented the family he'd tried to destroy. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely sign his name. He didn't say a word. Just pushed the paper back across the table, stood up, and walked out of the room. A man utterly and completely defeated. In the months that followed, a fragile peace settled over our lives. With Adam gone and legal guardrails firmly in place, the house began to feel like home again. The oppressive quiet was replaced by Dad's old jazz records and the cheerful chatter of a new, kinder caregiver. Uncle Jim and Mr. Henderson started visiting regularly, filling the rooms with warmth and laughter. The fortress Adam had built around our father had crumbled, and life was flowing back in. Dad's health remained delicate, but with the stress and confusion lifted, parts of the old him began to resurface. There were frustrating, foggy days, but also moments of startling clarity. One afternoon, we were sitting on the porch, watching late winter sun filter through bare branches of the oak tree. He'd been quiet for a long time, and I thought he was sleeping. Then he turned to me, his blue eyes clear and focused. "He's gone, isn't he?" he asked, voice soft but steady. "Adam," I nodded, throat tight. "Yes, Dad, he's gone." He looked out at the garden, at the dormant rose bushes I'd been carefully pruning. "He was always in such a hurry," he murmured. "Always reaching for the next thing, for the apex. He never understood you don't build a life by taking. You build it by tending." He reached over and placed his frail, trembling hand over mine. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Your mother always said he had the fire, but you have the earth. You always look after things, Sarah. You see the roots." Tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry for months finally welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. It wasn't just forgiveness or gratitude. It was acknowledgement. He saw me. After a lifetime of feeling overshadowed by my brother's blinding ambition, my quiet, steady father saw the strength in my stillness. He saw the value in my tendency to nurture rather than conquer. In that single quiet moment, a lifetime of sibling rivalry and feeling second best dissolved into nothing. I never heard from Adam again. I learned through Uncle Gene that his business had collapsed under the weight of debt. He could no longer hide with our father's money. He sold his condo, moved away, and vanished from our lives. There was no dramatic apology, no tearful reconciliation. Our story ended in that silent conference room. I had to accept that the brother I once knew, or perhaps the brother I'd wanted him to be, was truly gone. There was a hollow ache where that relationship used to be, but it was a clean wound now, no longer festering with deceit. The battle had changed me. The quiet, compliant woman who'd once shrunk from confrontation had found her voice. I'd faced down my own brother, the person who defined my role as the lesser one, my entire life. And I'd won, not by being louder or more aggressive, but by being more patient, more thorough, and more resolute. I discovered a resilience in myself I never knew I possessed, a core of steel beneath the soft earth of my nature. That spring, as first green shoots pushed through soil in my father's garden. I felt a sense of renewal that mirrored the season. I was in the rose garden, the scent of damp earth and new life all around me. I reached out and snipped a dead cane from one of my mother's favorite bushes, the wood dry and brittle in my hand. It was necessary work. Sometimes to save the plant, to protect its future, and allow new, beautiful things to grow. You have to cut away the parts that are dead and rotten. You have to be ruthless in your tenderness. Looking at the healthy, vibrant bush, ready for a new season of growth. I finally understood. This was my justice. Not the ruin of my brother, but the salvation of my father. Not about vengeance, but about preservation. I'd protected my father's legacy, reclaimed my family's honor, and in the process, I'd finally, fully found myself. And that was a victory more profound than any revenge.